Hi, welcome to Mission Control Houston. We're here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, and I am Brandy Dean. I'm working the Public Affairs Office here, and I've got here with me Dory Tomiko, who is the Visiting Vehicle Officer on the Space Station Flight Control team. So I'm going to let her tell a little bit about herself, and then I hear you have some questions for us. Dory?
Thanks, Brandy. Hey guys, like you said, my name's Dory, and I've worked here at NASA since for 5 years now, full time. But before that, I actually worked here when I was in college. So I started back in 2004, and I worked here every other semester. So I've gotten a lot of experience while I've been here. And like she said, I'm in the visiting vehicle office, and so we work in mission control for the space station, and we are in charge of space station safety when there's another vehicle coming to the space station. So lots of vehicles come. The Russians have their Progress and Soyuz. The Europeans have a vehicle. The Japanese Space Agency has a vehicle, and now there are two U.S. vehicles who are coming. And so anytime those vehicles are near the ISS, the VVO is in charge of making sure that they're being safe and that the ISS is safe and the crew is safe.
And y'all have a vehicle that's coming soon, right?
We do, yeah. Next weekend we'll have Dragon, which is SpaceX's vehicle, and they're based out of LA, out in California.
All right. Well, thanks, Dory. Okay, I hear that y'all have some questions for us there in Phoenix, so send them our way.
Um, how do astronauts maintain muscle mass and microgravity?
How do astronauts maintain muscle mass and microgravity?
That's a really good question and something that's really important on the space station. The astronauts do a lot of exercise. They have exercise in their schedules every day. They have different kinds of exercise they can do. Of course, it's all modified to make it work in space, and so sometimes they actually have to use kind of bungee cords to attach themselves to the equipment to kind of or simulate gravity. But they have things like treadmills and exercise bikes, and then they do weights and things like that too. So lots of the same exercises we do on Earth, just a little bit modified.
Yeah, they have special equipment for it to make it work without gravity to hold it down.
Cool. Thank you.
Do you use robotic mechanical arms on the space station?
Do we use a lot of mechanical arms on the space station?
We do have we have several robotics arms. Yeah, the big one that you've probably seen is the SSRMS, and that's the really big arm that we're actually going to use next weekend for when Dragon comes up. Dragon's going to come real close to station, and then the arm's going to come out and grab it. The Japanese have their own smaller arm that they use on their module for their science experiments, but robotics is very big at the space station.
And I think sometimes there are astronauts that go on the end of the robotic arm to move around during spacewalks. And there's also a robot that lives inside the space station called Robonaut 2. So it's not a robotic arm, but an actual robot with arms.
Do you have a lot of oxygen tanks, or how do you clean the air in the space stations?
So the space station has oxygen scrubbers, and they're these machines that basically clean the oxygen for us. And so that's how we kind of recirculate that air and keep it clean and keep it with the right amount of um, items in it for good breathing and things like that.
What is the process for becoming an astronaut and how long does it take?
Well, that's a really good question. It kind of depends. Lots of people will apply to become astronauts. That's the first step. You have to send in an application, and sometimes you have to send in different applications. You won't get it your first try or your second try. They get thousands of applications, and they pick just a handful of astronauts when they pick a new class. That's what they call them. But there's an application process, and then if you make it through that, there's an interview process. There's a lot of testing you have to do physically to make sure you can handle really being an astronaut, because being in zero G is tough on your body. And then there's also a social aspect to it too, where they make sure that if you're going to be stuck in a house, imagine, with 6 people for 6 months, you want to make sure that you're really good at getting along with people. And so that's a little bit of it too, that you really have the right personality for it. And then of course you have to have had enough schooling to really be able to help on the space station with doing all the science and everything. So a lot of the astronauts have PhDs, and if not, most of them have master's degrees. So those are kind of the broad areas.
And most of them have the degrees in science or math or engineering, maybe technology fields. So it's kind of a specific area you have to start studying early on, so you're good enough to go into space when it's time.
uh, what up, Mom? Does everybody get along at the space station?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's just like, if you put six people together, like I said for a while, I'm sure there'll be times when you wish you could, get by yourself for a little bit and have some personal time. And so, but these people are all really good at getting along, and they're all really great friends too. They train a lot together before they go up there, so they're really a team and almost like a family by the time they go up there. So yeah, they get along really well, and they have a lot of fun too.
Alright, word up.
We have a robotics class on campus. How extensively are robots used in the program and what type of robots are used?
Yes, we talked a little bit about it before, but we use robotics a lot in the space station. Like we said, the arm is a really integral part. A lot of the work we do outside the space station, where we need to fix things or do some maintenance, that a lot of that involves the arm, because the arm can reach almost the entire space station. So we use that a lot. And then, like Brandy had mentioned, we have Robonaut up there, who's our robot astronaut, and we're just starting to really get to use him. But he's going to be able to do tasks so that the astronauts don't have to, because going out in space is dangerous. And so, we like to make sure we prepare a lot before we do it, and we send them out there when they have really important things to do. And so if we can send Robonaut out there instead to do some of the easier stuff, that's kind of a long-term goal for us. So you'll see a lot of robotics use in the future.
And you can find out more about Robonaut online at www.nasa.gov/Robonaut. And actually, you can talk with him via Twitter at twitter.com/AstroRobonaut. So y'all can find out a little bit more that way.
Um, who made the food? Like the packet? I did.
Can you repeat that question? I didn't quite hear it.
Who made the food? The packet, the food.
Who
Yeah.
makes the food packages?
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
actually we have a group here at JSC that's in charge of astronaut food, and it's difficult. We try to make the same kind of food that you have on the ground, but you have to make it kind of differently. Sometimes you have to take a lot of the water out of it, so it's dehydrated food, and then we add the water back in when we're in space. But we have a lot of people from different countries here, and different countries have different food that they specialize in or that they really enjoy. And so one of the things we do is make sure that we have food that people from their home countries, so that it feels a little bit more like home. And so one of the things they do is on big holidays, if there's special food you eat on a holiday, they'll actually send it up for that holiday. And so, like we eat sauerkraut at New Year's, that kind of a thing. So if there's a special food, for example, that the Russians have for a holiday, then they'll send it on board so that they can have the food they would normally have if they were at home for that holiday.
And before the crew goes into space, they get to try all the different kinds of food and decide what they like, and then they work with the team here on the ground to make sure that they get the right amounts of different vitamins and nutrition, and get a good balanced diet, and then that's what's sent up for them, so that they don't have to eat anything that they can't stand.
Since space shuttles are no longer in use, how are supplies delivered to the space station?
Good question.
Yeah, another good question. So right now we get crew to the space station via the Soyuz, and that's Russia's vehicle that can take people up in it. So that's how everybody's going up and back right now. For cargo, for non-people, we have lots of different vehicles that can go up there right now. The Russians have a vehicle called Progress, which is like the Soyuz, except it's full of stuff, not people. The Europeans have one called ATV, and the Japanese have a vehicle called HTV, and those are both cargo vehicles that come to the space station. And now we have two U.S. companies, Dragon, that we were talking about, so it's coming next week and bringing up some cargo and supplies and some science experiments. And then Orbital's vehicle, Cygnus, will be coming up later this year, and it will be able to do that too.
What other types of careers are possible with NASA?
What other type of careers are possible at NASA? Well, there are a whole lot of different types of things you can do at NASA. Obviously, you can be a flight controller like Dory here, or an astronaut, or just an engineer. I work in the public affairs office, so I write a lot, and there's really not a whole lot of areas that NASA doesn't touch in some way, but most people are going to be in the science or math or engineering fields.
You have specific daily routines on the space station?
Specific daily routines on the space station?
Yeah, actually the days are very scheduled on the space station because time and space is really important. We have a lot of science we want to get done. We have vehicles that are coming up. We have robotics things we want to do, and so the day is very well scheduled. And one of the things is that we start the day at a set time and we end the day at a set time, and we have lunch. We try to keep it at around lunchtime. Same with dinner, and so we schedule activities in between those times. And so yeah, everything's very scheduled, and the ground and the crew can both see that schedule both for that day and in the future. We plan a lot in advance.
And it's planned very detailed too, down to I think 5 minute increments, so that they know what they are supposed to be doing at any given time, and so that the ground makes sure that they have enough time for the things that they're asking them to do, and they don't run out of time before the task is done. And ready for your next question, if you are.
What does mission control do?
Mission Control does a whole lot of jobs, actually. If you've seen a picture of Mission Control, you can see there are a lot of different desks. We call those consoles. And each console does something different. But the main job of Mission Control is to help the space station, to help the crew, and to help the structure, the space station itself, to do what it needs to get done. So we have people like me, the VDOs, that are in charge of safety when there's a vehicle coming to the space station. We have people that are in charge of the computers on board the space station and making sure they run. We have people that are in charge of keeping the life support systems working well, so the oxygen, like we talked about, and water. We have people that just run every different piece, keeping a space station in the right place in space. So just about anything you can think of. There are even people that have to figure out, where stuff is stored on the space station, because you have closets in your house, but on the space station, there are closets on the walls and on the floor and on the ceiling. And so think about you're living in your house, and then 6 months later, new people come into your house. You have no idea where they put the scissors or where the stapler is, and so we on the ground have to help out with that too, to kind of keep track of where things are. So lots of things that Mission Control does for the space station.
Ready for your next question?
How difficult is it using the zero gravity toilet?
That's always a fun question, huh? So I've never gotten to use it myself, but I have talked to some of the astronauts, and one of the things is they do a lot of training on the ground. We do training for everything, and that's not an exception. You have to learn how the machine works, because it's definitely different than a regular toilet, and you have to learn how to use it properly. And then once they have that training, it's not difficult. It's just a different process they have to learn.
Next question.
How many different types of jobs are at Mission Control?
How many different types of jobs are in mission control? It's hard to count, get a real count, because if you can see where we are. There are a number of desks, just like the one we're sitting at here, who each have a person at it doing a specific job, and each of those desks has somebody who sits at them all day. So there's 3 people who sit at them, for about 8 or 9 hours at a time, and they switch off so that there's always somebody there. And each of those desks also has a whole room of people, usually that sits somewhere else, not in this room, but that backs them up on different activities they might have to do somewhere else. So it's a lot of people. It takes a lot of people to keep the space station going. Next question.
What kind of college coursework is needed to follow the career field of an astronaut?
Like we had talked about, most of the astronauts are involved in technology or science or engineering, and so you start off with your bachelor's degree in one of those areas, and then you kind of figure out what you want your specialty to be, and then they'll go and get a master's in that, and most of the time they'll even go and get a PhD. So the highest kind of degree you can get to really become an expert on that subject.
And I think a lot of the astronauts would tell you that their recommendation is, because it's so hard to be an astronaut, you should really study something that you love anyway, that you'll love doing even if you're not going to do it as an astronaut. So that that also helps you learn to be really the best in your field. If you love it, you'll work hard at it. And so that increases your chance of being an astronaut, but it also gives you a backup plan if you're not able to be an astronaut.
What temperatures outside of space stations do you experience, and how are temperatures adjusted for the temperature change?
That's a good question. When it is nighttime outside the space station, so the space station is going around the Earth, so about half the time it's in the sunlight, and half the time it's behind the Earth, and so it's in the dark. And when it's in the dark, it's way below freezing outside, and when it's in the sun, it's much hotter than it ever gets on Earth. And so you can get really big temperature differences. And so when the crew is inside, the space station maintains a good temperature for them, and it uses different ways to either collect the sun and use its energy to help heat the station, or to kind of reject some of that heat to keep it at the right temperature when it gets too hot. And then when the astronauts go outside to do their spacewalks, their suits do that for them. Their suits have has water running through it, and they can control the temperature of the water, and that will help control the temperature inside the spacesuit to keep them from getting too hot or too cold.
And for when it's really cold, if it's nighttime and they're working on something they really need their fingers for, they have heaters in their gloves that keep their fingers warm. So lots of things that goes into keeping you comfortable when you're in space. Next question.
Uh, what kind of jobs are on the space station?
So the astronauts, when they're on the space station, do a lot of different things. The thing you probably hear the most about is the science. You know, they're doing all kinds of really cool experiments, doing things that we can only do in space. You know, figuring out how gravity affects different things, and so that's what they really enjoy doing. They love doing science. But they also really like looking at the Earth. We do a lot of studying of the Earth, taking pictures of the Earth. Um, Sometimes when we have things like hurricanes that are coming, the astronauts will actually help with that and take pictures of that for the ground, since we get a really good view of that. And then there are things that they have to do just to keep the space station working. So it's kind of like how you have to do some chores around your house to keep your house clean and functioning. They have to do chores in space too, and so they have to do some cleaning, or they have to do some maintenance to keep some of the equipment working.
Does the space station continue to grow in size to hold more astronauts, cosmonauts, etc.?
The space station is pretty much done growing now. It was designed to hold 6 people, and that's where we are. And so we're going to keep rotating those 6 people in and out, but we don't intend to get much bigger or put many more people in there. It's pretty much the size it's going to be.
This is a live view that you're seeing here of what the space station looks like on the inside right now. This is the Destiny Laboratory, which is the the United States laboratory. There are 3 different laboratories on the United States side of the space station. There's one from the U.S., and then also one from Europe, and one from Japan. And then the Russian side of the space station has a couple of other modules. So it's really big. It's about as long as about the size of a football field with the solar arrays. And there's actually, I think the crew members tend to tell you that there's plenty of room for 6 people in there, and actually they are able to spend a lot of their time kind of by themselves working, and they don't necessarily work side by side all the time.
What kind of training do they do in NASA?
What kind of training do we do at NASA?
Training for the astronauts, they do all sorts of training. They spend a lot of their time doing training to get ready. They do things from training, for example, how to fix a computer that may break, because we don't, you can't just send, you can't call somebody to come fix your computer in space, right? You kind of have to know how to do it. So we get training in that kind of stuff. They also get training for all the science they're going to have to do, so they understand what they're going to need to be doing for the experiments. They do a lot of training if they're going to do spacewalks, to make sure they understand what they're doing and where they're going to go in space. It's really choreographed, almost like a dance when they go out in space, where they know exactly where they're going to put their hand or where they're going to put their foot. It's very precise. And then, of course, they train just generically on things like using the robotic arm. It's a really big arm, and they have to learn how to handle it and how to work it very smoothly for things like capturing vehicles. So a lot of training there. And then the people on the ground also do training. We do some things called simulations, and that's where we set computers up that run and pretend like the space station is running, and pretend like, for example, Dragon is coming. And so we actually see graphics just like it's really happening in real life, and the entire mission control team will practice and pretend like it's really happening. And so we practice all the stuff we're going to have to do on the ground too.
How long did you have to train to be a visiting vehicle officer?
So like I said, I've been here for 5 years, and as Brandy mentioned, for each of the positions that's here, there's actually more people helping them in different rooms. And so we first get trained to go ahead and work, and we call those in the back rooms. And so I got trained to work 3 different positions in the back room before I got to come up here and work in the front room, and I got my certification last year. So it took me about 4 years of training to be able to make it into actual mission control.
And you have to kind of go step by step, right? You take one position at a time, learn how to do it well, and then move on to the next one.
Exactly.
All right, next question. I'm sorry, we weren't able to hear that one. I don't think your microphone was turned on.
What does Robonaut do now in space?
What does Robonaut do now?
So Robonaut, just like we were talking about, he's kind of in training right now. He went up there, and now he's kind of learning the things he's going to be doing. And so they're doing some testing with him. They're using him for very small things inside the space station right now, and because everybody has to learn. The astronauts have to learn what it's like to work next to a robot because he's new there, and Robonaut has to learn about the kinds of things he can do in the space station, and the team on the ground that helps control Robonaut needs to learn, how he works in space and what kind of things they can do. So right now he's kind of in training, just like the rest of us go through. And then, like we said, eventually he'll be able to go and do things for the astronauts to kind of help save them time.
Some of the stuff that's maybe a little bit too boring for the astronauts to do, because robots don't mind if it's boring. Next question.
How come you don't go to any other planets but the moon?
Yeah, we don't yet. We want to. We want to go and explore lots of other places, maybe some other planets or some asteroids or even farther than that. So definitely we're looking at going, way beyond the Earth. And we hope to do that in the future, but it's like training. You have to take little steps. So the moon's the closest thing, so that's the first baby step that we take, and we practice on that, and then we'll keep going.
We're actually building a new spaceship right now called the Orion that's going to let us take people to other planets. We'll be able to go to the moon or asteroids or even Mars on Orion. And you can find out more about that online too at www.nasa.gov/Orion. Next question.
I just want to thank you for talking to my students, but also some context. About 2 months ago, they spoke to one of the designers of Robonaut, Cody Hensley. I think he works in your building.
Oh, okay.
So, they had some context. My question, though, is did the people, astronauts on the space station, have any opinions or sightings of the asteroid?
The one on Friday?
The one that passed us.
I don't think that they had any from the space station that they saw. We watched it really closely at NASA, and we actually have some pictures online if you want to go look at nasa.gov. There's a lot of information there about the asteroid that flew by that we knew was coming on Friday, the big one, and also the one that hit Russia. So there's lots of interesting information there.
And one of the groups that works here, Pointing, is another group in mission control, and they were looking into the crew being able to see that. And I think one of the things they said is that it was too small to actually see very easily. Space is really large, and so it was a little bit too small for them to see just from the space station. And it also depends on where the asteroid was and where the crew and the space station were at the time, if the Earth was in the way. So I don't think we got to see that one. I think it's good that it was too small to see. That's what we like for asteroids close to Earth.
We do let the astronauts know, though, when there's going to be something cool in space to see that they're going to be able to see. And a lot of times they're able to take good pictures and video, which we all put on nasa.gov, and you can see for yourself. So there's lots of really cool pictures of just the Earth and beautiful pictures of it, and also the northern lights, things like that, and meteors hitting and burning up in the Earth's atmosphere, and lots of really cool phenomenon.
All right, and Dory and Brandy, thank you so much for answering all of these wonderful questions. Wanted to give Salt River a last chance to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank y'all. Great questions. We really appreciate y'all talking with us.
It was lots of fun. Thanks, guys.